The Spanish-American War was a brief conflict in 1898 that marked the end of Spain's colonial empire and the rise of the United States as a world power. A key factor in the lead up to the war was yellow journalism, a sensationalist style of news reporting used by competing New York City newspapers, particularly those owned by William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer. These papers exaggerated Spanish atrocities in Cuba to boost circulation and inflame public opinion against Spain. President William McKinley, the 25th U.S. President, initially sought a diplomatic resolution to the conflict, but was eventually pressured by public opinion and the sinking of the USS Maine to declare war on Spain. The war was fought on two fronts, the Caribbean and the Pacific. Key U.S. victories included Commodore George Dewey's defeat of the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay and the land battles in Cuba, such as the Battle of San Juan Hill, where Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders gained fame. Lasting less than 4 months, the war ended with the Treaty of Paris. Spain was forced to cede Puerto Rico and Guam to the U.S. and sell the Philippines for $20 million. This marked a significant expansion of American influence and a new era of foreign policy, establishing the United States as a global power. How y'all folks doing this fine day? It's Gator here at the Cable Company. I'm so glad you stopped in to see me today. Today we're going over the Spanish-American War. It was on April 21st to August 13th, 1898. Was fought between Spain and the United States in 1898. It began with the sinking of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor in Cuba, and resulted in the U.S. acquiring sovereignty over Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, and establishing a protectorate over Cuba. It represented U.S. intervention in the Cuban War of Independence and the Philippine Revolution, with the latter later leading to the Philippine-American War. The Spanish-American War brought an end to almost 4 centuries of Spanish presence in the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific. The United States, meanwhile, not only became a major world power, but also gained several island possessions spanning the globe, which provoked rancorous debate over the wisdom of expansion. The 19th century represented a clear decline for the Spanish Empire, while the United States went from a newly founded country to a rising power. In 1895, Cuban nationalists began a revolt against Spanish rule, which was brutally suppressed by the colonial authorities. W. Joseph Campbell argues that the yellow journalism in the U.S. exaggerated atrocities in Cuba to sell more newspapers and magazines, which swayed American public opinion in support of the rebels. But historians Andrea Pitzer also points to the actual shift towards savagery of the Spanish military leadership, who adopted the brutal reconcentration policy after replacing the relatively conservative Governor General of Cuba, Arciano Martinez Campos, with the more unscrupulous and aggressive Valeriano Weyler, nicknamed the Butcher. President Grover Cleveland resisted mounting demands for U.S. intervention, as did his successor William McKinley. Though not seeking a war, McKinley made preparation and readiness for one. In January 1898, the U.S. Navy armored cruiser USS Maine was sent to Havana to provide protection for U.S. citizens. After the Maine was sunk by a mysterious explosion in the harbor on February 15, 1898, political pressures pushed McKinley to receive congressional authority to use military force. On April 21st, the U.S. began a blockade of Cuba, and soon after, Spain and the U.S. declared war. The war was fought in both the Caribbean and the Pacific, where American war advocates correctly anticipated that the U.S. naval power would prove decisive. On May 1st, a squadron of U.S. warships deployed to the Spanish fleet at Manila Bay in the Philippines and captured the harbor. The first U.S. Marines landed in Cuba on June the 10th in the island's southeast, moving west and engaging in the Battle of El Caney and San Juan Hill on July 1st, and then destroying the fleet at the capturing San Diego de Cuba on July 17th. On June 20th, the island of Guam surrendered without resistance, and on the 25th of July, U.S. troops landed on Puerto Rico, of which a blockade had begun on May 8th, and where fighting continued until an armistice was signed on August 13th. The war formally ended with the 1898 Treaty of Paris, signed on December the 10th, with terms favorable to the U.S. The treaty ceded ownership of Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the U.S., and set Cuba up to become an independent state in 1902, although in practice it became a U.S. protectorate. The cession of the Philippines involved payment of $20 million, which would be $760 million today, to Spain by the U.S. to cover infrastructure owned by Spain. In Spain, the defeat in the war was a profound shock to the natural psyche and provoked a thorough psychological and artistic revelation of Spanish society known as Generation of 98. There's the Spanish-American War, part of the colonization of the Americas, the Cuban War of Independence, and the Philippine Revolution. The Signal Corps extending telegraph lines, USS Iowa at the Victory Fleet Review in August 1898 in New York Harbor, Filipino soldiers wearing Spanish 5 helmets outside Manila. The Spanish signing the Treaty of Paris, Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders at San Juan Hill, replacing the Spanish flag at Fort San Antonio Abad, Fort Malate. The date was April the 21st, August 13th, 1898. That's 3 months and 3 weeks and 1 day. The location was Cuba and Puerto Rico, the Caribbean Sea, Guam, and the Philippine Sea. The result? U.S. victory, Treaty of Paris, founding of the first Philippine Republic, and beginning of the Philippine-American War. Spain sells to Germany its last colonies in the Pacific in 1899. The end of the Spanish Empire in the Americas and Asia. The rise of the United States as a major colonial power. Territorial changes. Spain releases sovereignty over Cuba, secedes Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines to the United States for $20 million, paid to Spain by the United States for infrastructure owned by Spain. United States, Spain, Cuba liberation, Philippine Revolutionary Army, commanders and leaders. William McKinley, Russell A. Alger, John Davis Long, Nelson A. Miles, Theodore Roosevelt, William Schaffner, Fitzhugh Lee, George Dewey, William Sampson, Wesley Merritt, Joseph Wheeler, Charles Sigsbee, Maximo Gomez, Carlito Garcia, Demetrio Dorney, Emilio Guandolo, Apollonio Mabry, Baldomero, Aguinaldo, Antonio Luna. The strength total was 300,000, 72,339 for the Americans. That says 339,783 total. Only 20 to 25% of the Army capable of field operations. 288,452 for the Caribbean. 278,447 in Cuba. Only 2,820 engaged in major land battles. 10,005 in Puerto Rico. And 51,331 in the Philippines. Casualties and losses. Total 4,119 American, 2,446 dead, 369 soldiers killed, 10 sailors killed, 6 Marines killed, 2,061 dead from disease, 1,662 wounded, 11 captured, 1 cargo ship sunk, and 1 cruiser damaged. So we got total at 56,400 to 56,600 Spanish. 15,700 to 15,800 dead. 200 soldiers killed. 500 to 600 sailors killed. 15,000 dead from disease. 700 to 800 wounded. 40,000 plus captured. 6 small ships sunk. 11 cruisers sunk. 2 destroyers sunk. There you have it. There's a little history on it. There's my crude drawing. Theodore Roosevelt in the San Juan Hill with his guys. Alright? I appreciate every one of you for stopping in to see me today. I love you guys. You're one of a kind. Put down in the comments what you think about it. I'll talk to y'all next time. I love you. Make sure you hit that like button. That's important, people. Hit that like button and comment. And just tell me, say something, okay? I love you guys. Bye-bye for now. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.